Maybe it's just the pressure of the faith. Maybe it's the idea that I don't want to have another failure. I don't know, but I keep thinking that you and I could make this work.
There are moments when silence speaks louder than any scream. When a whispered truth outshines 1,000 declarations. And when a single voice once quieted, once tucked behind someone else's narrative, resides with such authenticity that it reshapes everything we thought we knew. For over a decade, Sister Wives fans watched Meri Brown through the filtered lens of reality television. The dutiful wife, the one with the slight smile, the gracious nods, the one who never quite made waves even as she was quietly swept to the margins. While Kody Brown played the lead and Robyn Brown was carefully portrayed as the soft-spoken peacemaker. Meri was assigned the role of the background character in her own life story. But beneath that composed exterior, something was cracking. She wasn't silent because she didn't have something to say. She was silent because she had been strategically silenced. And when that silence finally broke, it wasn't with fireworks or a production team. It was with a raw, unedited whisper on a snowy porch, and it changed everything. What started as subtle discomfort from fans' questions, curiosities, little gut feelings that something wasn't right, suddenly erupted into a wave of collective realization when a 2-minute grainy video clip surfaced in the dead of night. No music, no TLC branding. Just shaky camera footage posted anonymously to Reddit showing Robyn and Kody in a dimly lit hallway. Their voices were low, but not low enough to mask what was being said. Robyn's voice trembled not with fear, but calculation. She's cooking something up. Meri's spoken to people. A pause, then. If she goes public with the truth, you won't make it through this. Kody's cold reply, cut like broken glass. She doesn't have the courage. She's threatened this for years. We'll bury her. Wasn't drama. It was damage control. Was a plotted silencing of a woman who had given everything. And for fans, it was the first undeniable glimpse behind the curtain, a moment that turned passive viewers into investigators. Truth seekers, defenders of the woman who had once seemed so easily dismissed. What followed was a frenzy. Social media ignited like dry brush in a lightning storm. TikTok flooded with stitch videos. YouTube reactors with millions of subscribers dissected every second of the hallway footage. Twitter, now X, trended with hashtags like #JusticeForMeri and #FreeMeriBrown. But it wasn't just the fandom that was watching now. It was the culture. Because for every woman who'd ever been gaslit, every person who had ever been sidelined, in their own relationship, Meri's unraveling truth felt deeply personal. Then came this sticky note, just 5 hauntingly simple words scrawled in Robyn Brown's unmistakable handwriting. Don't discuss this just yet. Found taped too. A lease agreement from Meri's former Las Vegas home. The note made no apologies, no explanations. Meri posted the photo to Instagram without a caption. She didn't need one. That little square of paper wasn't just a note. It was a receipt. A receipt for years of orchestrated silence. A receipt for every moment Meri looked into the camera and swallowed her truth. She hadn't simply chosen to be quiet. She was told to be conditioned, controlled, and the world started to wake up. But still, the defining moment hadn't yet arrived until it did. A snowy porch, a gray sweater, no production crew, no makeup artist, just Meri, sitting on a swing. Snowflakes dusting her shoulders like tiny reminders of all the seasons she had weathered in silence. Her voice, trembling not from performance but from years of repression, finally poured out the truth. I gave everything to this family, she whispered. And when it hurt, I kept quiet. When I was made to feel invisible, I smiled. She didn't name names. She didn't need to. Every syllable landed like thunder. I'm not unstable. I'm free. And with that, the veil shattered. Fans weren't just watching Meri anymore. They were seeing her. The real her. Not the woman, edited into compliance. Not the sidekick to Robyn's spotlight, but the survivor, the truth teller. The woman who had lived through emotional starvation and finally said, enough. In the days that followed, everything started shifting. TikTok exploded again. But this time, it wasn't just fans reacting. It was professionals, therapists, abuse counselors, spiritual leaders breaking down what Meri had endured. Robyn's carefully cultivated image began to crumble, especially after her half-sister Belle posted a calm, yet cutting 45-minute expose. No theatrics, just steady truth. Robyn learned early how to use vulnerability as a weapon. Belle said tears could always get her what she wanted, and Cody, who was always her easiest audience. The video amassed over 10 million views in under 24 hours. The comment section became a shrine to every woman who had ever been guilted into silence. Suddenly, it wasn't just about Meri. It was about the millions who saw their own stories in hers. And while the fandom processed this storm of revelations, TLC, an empire built on curated dysfunction, was forced to reckon with it. Cody's behavior began to spiral on camera, culminating in a full-scale breakdown during a season 19 taping. A screaming match at Meri, accusing her of manipulation, of playing victim, of betraying him. It got so intense that producers stepped in. Security was requested. Cody was removed from the set. Within days, an internal HR memo leaked confirming he'd been suspended from filming for 18 days for verbally confronting production staff and violating filming protocols. But this wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It was a cultural pivot. When Sister Wives returned to air, something radical had happened. Cody and Robyn were gone from the trailer, from interviews, from the forefront. And in their place were the women they had tried to overshadow: Meri, Christine, and Janelle. The season 19 trailer was all soft piano, golden light, and deep reflective voiceovers, but not a single frame of Cody or Robyn. It was the wives, the real wives. The women who had carried the emotional weight of a crumbling system. And when the official TLC press kit dropped, it confirmed the shift. Cody and Robyn weren't just missing, they were omitted. The audience was stunned, but they were ready. TLC had finally listened to the very people who built their empire. Leaked internal emails from the network told the rest of the story. One note read, "Viewer sentiment is highly in favor of the other wives. We need to adjust accordingly." Another, labeled confidential, stated flatly, "We can no longer defend the Brown family's image at the cost of reality. This is not sustainable storytelling." That was it. It's the moment the mythology cracked. No more illusion. No more curated chaos to protect one man's fragile ego. And as fans dug deeper, they discovered even more. Screenshots of texts from former crew members, blog posts from people who had crossed paths with the Browns behind the scenes. A photograph from 2021 showing Robyn crying outside a mediation office, while Cody paced angrily on the phone nearby. And then, in a last-ditch effort to regain control, Cody attempted the unthinkably lawsuit against Meri, demanding $230,000 for brand damage and an NDA to silence her permanently. But the court wasn't having it. The judge dismissed the case, citing lack of grounds and clear public interest. And Meri? She was ready. She held up the unsigned NDA handwritten by Robyn in 2020 and looked directly into the camera during a live stream. "You don't get to control my story." Anymore, that moment was no longer about contracts. It was about closure, okay, and healing. Healing not just for Meri, but for Christine, who had long since walked away and found her voice. For Janelle, who had survived the grief of losing a son and still stood tall. And for the countless women watching who now understood that the silence wasn't a sign of weakness, it was survival. And once it was no longer needed, the truth roared louder than anyone could have imagined. This isn't just about sister wives. It's about anyone who's ever been told to be quiet, to play along, to not make waves. It's about what happens when the woman you ignored finally speaks. Because when Meri said, "I'm not unstable, I'm free," It wasn't just a line. It was a liberation heard around the world. Maybe that's why you're here. Because you saw it coming. You felt the cracks. You heard what she wasn't allowed to say before. And now that it's out there, you can't unhear it. So tell us, were you one of the ones who always knew something wasn't right? Were you waiting for this moment as much as she was? Because the story of Sister Wives isn't over. It's being told by the women who actually lived it.
You know, he would ask me to do things and ask me to be a certain way, or ask me to fix a situation, or ask me to share some information with him, or whatever, all these things.
It wasn't just a statement, it was a release, a reckoning. A seismic shift, not only for Meri Brown, but for every person who has ever been erased from their own narrative. Sidelined in their own story, told to smile through the ache, to dim their light to preserve someone else's image. And when it finally came, it didn't arrive with the polish of a TLC special or the artificial glamour of a network promo. It came in a moment that felt quiet, almost sacred, a woman in a gray sweater on a snow-dusted porch. Her voice breaking not for performance, but because the truth she'd held in for years had finally found a way out. "I'm not unstable," she whispered. "I'm free." That one line didn't just echo, it detonated. For over a decade, Sister Wives had packaged dysfunction in the shape of family values, casting Cody as the flawed butt-trying patriarch, Robyn as the empathetic, misunderstood peacemaker, and Meri as the problematic, standoffish outlier, whose decline in emotional connection was always coded as her own doing. But the truth, that sharp, burning, undeniable truth, had been hiding in plain sight. Tucked into the silences, the uncomfortable glances, the edited-out moments that fans could never quite name, but always felt. The entire dynamic shifted at exactly 2:14 a.m. when an anonymous Reddit user posted a grainy, shaky 2-minute video that would unravel everything. No music, no production credit, just fluorescent hallway lighting and two voices whispering with the kind of panic that wasn't born of love lost, but power slipping. Robyn's voice trembling yet cunning. She's planning something. Meri's been talking to people who support her leaving. A beat of hesitation. If she exposes the truth, you won't make it through this. And then Cody's flat, hard, rehearsed. She doesn't have the courage. She's threatened it for years. We'll take her out. And with those words, a house of cards built over 18 seasons began to crumble in real time. Fans didn't need subtitles to recognize those voices. They knew the cadence of Cody's deflections, the calculated emotion in Robyn's speech. They knew what they were hearing. It wasn't a lover's quarrel. It wasn't a behind-the-scenes marital spat. It was strategy. It was a power couple caught red-handed engineering a takedown of the one woman they couldn't control. And fans were done. TikTok became a storm of breakdowns and theory videos. YouTube exploded with live reactions. On X, formerly Twitter, hashtags like #FreeMeriBrown and #Expose the Truth trended globally. But this wasn't just gossip. It was liberation. A cultural breaking point. Because Meri's silence had always unsettled fans. It wasn't the silence of a woman with nothing to say, it was the silence of someone who had everything to say, but nowhere safe to say it. And now that silence had cracked. Then came the sticky note. 5 words, scrawled in Robyn's unmistakable handwriting. "Don't discuss this just yet," found taped to an old lease agreement from Meri's loss. Vegas home, Meri didn't post a caption. She didn't need to. That note didn't require explanation. It was a signal, smoking gun. It proved what many had suspected for years, that Meri's silence had been orchestrated. That she wasn't just edited out, she had been actively managed, controlled. And the idea that Robyn and Cody had constructed this sanitized narrative, while keeping Meri behind a wall of compliance, shattered the fanbase's perception of the show's authenticity. That note was a mirror held up to the audience, and for the first time, they saw clearly what had always been lurking behind the polished confessionals. Coercion disguised as unity. And then, just as the fandom began asking for more, Meri gave. It No PR team, no network protection, just her alone, on a porch swing with snow falling in the background. She opened her heart in a way that no reunion special, no tell-all interview ever had. Her words weren't elaborate. They weren't sharp. But they were drenched in truth. "I gave everything to this family," she whispered. "And when it hurt, I kept quiet. When I was made to feel invisible, I smiled." It was not a tantrum. It was not retribution. It was truth. Heavy, aching truth. She didn't name names, but she didn't have to. Her eyes carried the weight of years. Her tone was steady. Her pauses said more than paragraphs could. This wasn't the cold, aloof woman we were told about. This wasn't the emotionally unstable ex-wife Cody had painted with broad, dismissive strokes. This was the woman who endured, who bent without breaking, who survived, not because she was too weak to leave, but because she wasn't ready to abandon herself until now. And the internet. It didn't just react, it stood still. It grieved with her. It believed her. And something beautiful happened. Other women began to speak too. Stories flooded the comments from women who had endured the same manipulations from marriages. Churches, workplaces, women who had been sidelined, silenced, gaslit. Meri's voice became theirs. A symbol, not just of heartbreak, but of healing. And then came Robyn's own half-sister. In a devastatingly calm 45-minute TikTok video, Belle explained the truth of growing up around Robyn. She could always cry on command. She learned early that tears moved people. Guilt was her currency. And Cody, he was her audience of one. There was no rage, no spectacle, just facts. And within a day, the video crossed 10 million views. Belle's testimony wasn't just a sibling vendetta. It was a mirror held to the strategies we'd watched Robyn employ for years. Now, finally, explained with context that no editing room could erase. And while the internet processed all this, something even more remarkable was happening behind the scenes. The show was changing. Cody's breakdown on set following Meri's porch video had been catastrophic. In a now leaked email from TLC production staff, Cody had screamed at Meri during filming, accused her of betrayal, and attempted to storm off set, refusing to film further unless she's removed. Security was brought in. Cody was escorted from the set just days later. HR confirmed he had been suspended from filming for 18 days due to inappropriate behavior toward staff and cast. But that wasn't the true fallout. The true shift came when season 19's official trailer dropped. It featured soft piano, slow motion, pensive voiceovers. Heartfelt clips, but no Cody, no Robyn. They weren't just silent, they were absent. This wasn't a teaser or editing trick. This was a pivot. Christine, Janelle, and Meri were now the anchors of the show. The three women who had once been portrayed as drifting or lost were now the ones steering the ship. And when the press kit confirmed it, fans were vindicated. Cody and Robyn weren't just out of frame, they were out of the story. TLC had made a decision. And in leaked internal emails, the motivation was made painfully clear. Viewer sentiment is overwhelmingly in favor of the other wives. One email read, "We can no longer defend a narrative that doesn't reflect reality." Another internal note said it outright. The brand is not sustainable with the Brown family as previously positioned. Audiences are demanding transparency. Long accused of shielding Cody from accountability, had made their move. And Meri? She wasn't done. In what many are calling the final blow, Cody filed a lawsuit against her, attempting to claim $230,000 in damages to his brand and demanding she sign a non-disclosure agreement. But the court wasn't having it. The lawsuit was tossed. The judge called it a clear attempt to silence protected speech. And Meri, she held up the NDA in a live stream, a draft written by Robyn in 2020. Not signed by attorneys, just another attempt at control disguised as protection. And she looked into the camera, eyes clear. and said the words that echoed far beyond the fandom. "You don't get to control my story anymore." And that's what this is, isn't it? Not just a reality show recap. Not just a juicy headline. It's a reclamation. A woman taking back her voice, and in doing so, giving voice to millions. Because this story, long crafted through a male-centered lens, has now been taken over by the women who lived it. And the most profound part of it all. Meri didn't need to scream. She didn't need to blame. She simply told the truth. That truth hit harder than any dramatic arc the show had ever produced. So maybe you've watched since season 1. Maybe you only caught a few viral clips. But if you've ever felt that something was off, if you've ever stared at the TV and thought, there's more to this, then this moment is yours too. Because the real story of Sister Wives isn't about polygamy. It's about erasure. About who gets to tell the story and who gets edited out. And now finally, the woman who was always there, silent, smiling. Surviving's the one holding the mic. So take a seat, because this isn't Cody's story anymore. It's hers. And she's not done talking, untalking.
I still consider Janelle my sister wife. It's super weird, I think. But it's just that we're not really just friends.
It began with a whisper, not a roar. A subtle shift. A crack in the foundation that once formed could no longer be ignored. Meri Brown, once the shadowed figure in the background of Sister Wives, a woman often reduced to head tilts, silence, and reaction shots, was stepping forward into her own story. And this time there was no editing, no script, no producer notes guiding her message. Her voice, soft but soaked in years of restraint, cut through louder than any dramatic confessional ever could. Comments poured in, not just from fans, not just from reality TV junkies, but from women, from survivors, from anyone who had ever been asked to swallow their truth just to keep someone else comfortable. Meri's words didn't scream. They didn't beg. They didn't need to. They hit like a gut punch, because that kind of raw, undeniable truth doesn't require glitter or fireworks. Her statement, filmed simply on a porch in a gray sweater with snow falling behind her, wasn't just a monologue, it was a mirror. And it reflected back years of gaslighting, of narrative manipulation, of emotional exile masked as faith, unity, and family values. For over a decade, fans had watched Cody Brown dominate the family's voice, weaponizing his own pain while demanding compliance. Robyn Brown, meanwhile, was painted as the misunderstood peacekeeper, soft-spoken, teary-eyed, the woman caught in the crossfire of a complex dynamic. But Meri's quiet rebellion shifted that framing forever. When she posted that sticky note 5 scribbled words in Robyn's handwriting, "Don't discuss this just yet," everything changed. There was no caption, no explanation. Just that damning slip of paper taped to a decades-old lease agreement, peeking out like a skeleton finally ready to leave the closet. It wasn't just a note, it was a receipt. Evidence that Meri's silence wasn't personal, it was strategic. It was enforced. It was choreographed. Robyn hadn't stood by helplessly while Meri faded from screen time. She had authored it. That same Robyn who cried about unity, who clutched her chest in confessionals, speaking about love and fairness, had been penning the orders to keep Meri silent, hidden, manageable. And the fans, long attuned to Robyn's soft-spoken manipulation, finally had something concrete to point to. This wasn't speculation anymore. It was evidence. Real, physical, handwritten evidence. And it didn't end there. As the internet reeled, as Reddit threads dissected handwriting analysis and TikTok creators voiced outrage, another bomb dropped: a cease and desist letter sent from Robyn's legal team to a tiny podcast that had simply reached out to Meri. For an interview, it was a gag, not a safety precaution. It wasn't about protecting the family, it was about preserving the image. Robyn wasn't playing defense, she was orchestrating the entire operation. And suddenly, fans realized what Christine and Janelle had likely known all along. Robyn wasn't the passive bystander. She was a co-architect of the illusion. Out front, she wore flowy cardigans and teared up about spiritual unity. But behind the scenes, she was directing traffic with handwritten notes and legal threats. She was the strategist. The one who didn't raise her voice because she didn't have to. Cody did that part. And when it all finally snapped the control, the image, the silence, it was during a routine day of filming. A producer casually asked Cody about Meri's recent porch video, and the room froze. Something shifted in Cody. This wasn't the controlled, somewhat combative Cody from the confessionals. This was raw, visceral. She has no gratitude. He snapped, his voice vibrating with fury. She's going to burn everything I've built for what? A story? A victim complex? The crew stopped moving. The cast fell silent. And then it got worse. Cody didn't de-escalate. He didn't pull back. He raged. He stormed. Security was summoned. And just like that, the man who had been the central figure of Sister Wives for over a decade was escorted. Off set, not with a grand announcement, but in quiet disgrace. Days later, an internal HR memo leaked online. One line made the internet lose its breath. Due to conflict with production staff and refusal to adhere to filming protocols, Cody Brown will be removed from Sister Wives production for a period of 18 days. It wasn't long, but it was seismic, because for the first time in the show's history, it kept going without him. And something subtle but profound occurred in his absence. Producers, many of whom had likely been under internal pressure for years to protect the family brand, started digging into the vault. Old unaired footage, scenes once deemed too damning, too raw, too real started being reconsidered. Moments where Cody's gaslighting wasn't subtle but overt. Where Robyn's manipulation wasn't spiritual, it was tactical. Scenes that had previously been left on the cutting room floor in favor of unity were now being reevaluated. This wasn't a leak. It was a reckoning, and fans felt it. They noticed. They watched as the emotional gaslighting they'd always suspected was suddenly no longer being buried. And then came season 19's trailer. It dropped quietly with all the typical cues: piano music, slow motion, walking shots, themes of renewal and hope. But something was off. Something was missing. No Cody, no Robyn, not a frame, not a whisper. The couch interviews, once dominated by Cody's hand gestures and Robyn's strained emotion, were absent. Instead, Christine, Janelle, and Meri sat, in focus, finally given full breath. At first, fans thought it was a creative choice for a single episode. But then the press kit dropped, and Cody and Robyn's names weren't on it at all. Not an omission, not a mistake. An intentional institutional shift. And backstage, it was even messier. Internal TLC emails began leaking. Messages between producers and marketing. One read, "We are reconsidering the direction of the season. Viewer opinion is overwhelmingly in favor of the other wives." But the one that broke the dam was labeled confidential. "We can no longer protect the Brown family image at the expense of truth. This is no longer sustainable storytelling." That sentence said it all. For years, fans had sensed that TLC had been editing around Cody's tantrums, trimming Robyn's role, softening the conflict, protecting the myth of plural harmony. But no more. The veil was off, and even within the network, change was brewing. Female producers, some newer to the team, began advocating for transparency, for the voices of the wives who had been minimized, for the truth, and their instincts were rewarded. Meri's porch video racked up over 3 million views within days. Christine's memoir sold out before it even hit shelves. Janelle's no nonsense. Honesty resonated deeply with women across generations. This wasn't a cast shake-up, it was a revolution. TLC hadn't just pivoted, they'd surrendered to reality. Because the audience no longer wanted the myth. They wanted the truth. And truth was what Meri gave them. But Cody wasn't done. He launched one final offensive, a lawsuit demanding $230,000 in damages and a gag order to prevent Meri from speaking further. He accused her of defamation, of character attacks, of contract violations, but the judge dismissed it. The public dismissed it, and Meri. She responded by holding up an NDA drafted not by lawyers, but by Robyn in 2020 at another failed attempt at controlling. She looked into the camera and said it, steady and unflinching. "You don't get to control my story anymore." And that line, just like her original whisper on the porch, traveled through every screen. Because this wasn't just about Meri anymore. It was about every woman who's ever been told to stay quiet, to be grateful, to not make waves. It was about every wife who's ever been erased from her own marriage. Every worker who's been talked over in meetings. Every daughter taught to lower her voice. Meri Brown was no longer a supporting character in someone else's show. She had taken the mic. The world was finally listening. And then came Belle, Robyn's own half-sister, with no background music, no dramatic editing, just an iPhone, camera, and a steady voice. Belle spoke for 45 minutes and destroyed the fantasy. She didn't rage, she didn't insult, she told the truth. Of a girl who learned early how to weaponize guilt, to cry on demand, to reshape a room with a single tear. Robyn always knew how to get people to feel sorry for her, Belle said. She was delicate when it suited her, but calculated always. She described how Robyn crafted vulnerability into a tool, how she managed perceptions, and how Cody, emotionally reactive and prone to idealization, was the perfect recipient for her performances. And fans didn't just watch, they resonated. The comments weren't just from Sister Wives viewers. It came from women in churches, in homes, in abusive dynamics. From daughters of narcissists. From survivors of emotional control.